Hello everybody, welcome back to Dominions 5. We're picking up where we left off. It is now turn 53 in the first round of the tournament where we're playing as LA Man. And I've got a few turns here for you. We've summoned an Ivy King and there's a few miscellaneous things. Looks like Tianchi here is fighting a bit of Patala on the outskirts. We've got some random events: Unrest, Misfortune, Unrest, Population Loss, Dominion -3, Dominion +3. Okay, and the Palisades is complete. So there's nothing too much going on in the next few turns. We are basically just preparing for what will be eventually our war against Tianchi. So we are okay. We've got all the basic tech that we need. I'm not really gonna have time to get all the way up to Alteration 9, but I'm gonna be fine with mass protection and my guys that already have a ton of protection plus all the other buffs. We're gonna go grab Construction 8 because it's sort of accessible. And it's something that we can kind of make use of with our construction site and with our global. So we could get a few nice artifacts on the cheap, and we'll see if that helps us. Let's take a look at what we're forging. I'm forging a lot of temporary gem generating items. We play with Lucid's mod that includes these items. And it's especially important because I have almost no air income, so it's important that I have all my basic buffs covered by these gem items. So here we've got an earth. Now, this was actually probably a waste because this was sort of anticipating that I would get to Alteration 9, but in the end, I'm not really going to go there. Anyways, we'll have it. We're getting some earth boosters, the Cloak of Astral Storms. This is a air generator. The Ancient Casket is a death, 4 death temporary gems. Here we are forging a fire hat to get another fire booster. We're making some firebrands. I'm making a crystal shield. So the crystal shield is for, you see I'm making a couple of them. The crystal shield is to put on an Air 3 guy, which will allow him to cast Mass Flight on turn 1. And by default, Mass Flight is faster than Earthquake. So if we look here at Earthquake, casting time 200%. If you look at Mass Flight, 175. So I shouldn't need to also put a fast casting hat on these guys. They're a little expensive to make, and I don't have, I think they take a bit of water gems if I remember correctly. But having Mass Flight on turn 1 is going to be very useful. First of all, it will protect us from earthquake traps. But it's also pretty devastating because unless he also has Storm on turn 1, then I can script a huge army to just go land in the back. And that could even work in a fort battle. He's a smart player, he should probably put up Storm immediately to stop me from doing Mass Flight. But if he doesn't, that's something we could definitely exploit. Okay, that's pretty much it in terms of what we're forging. Oop, well, it doesn't really matter, we're not going to save this. Yeah, we're making some firebrands just to have a few wardens equipped with melee weapons, magical melee weapons that can sort of deal with elementals in close quarters. That's sort of the idea, at least. With whatever gold we have, we're recruiting a few extra mages, a few extra cavalry, and that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and bring up the next turn, turn 54. Okay, unexpected events, we're losing people, we're gaining people, we got some gold, and that's it. Okay, so this is it. This is the turn that we can issue attack orders. So we've consolidated our troops into three major armies. We've got the Southern Army here that took the throne. We've got an army here to protect this throne. And then we've got our biggest army up here that's going to go for his capital. I think this is where I'm going to talk about most of the scripting and the formations now that I've finally consolidated everything together. Was there anything here in the messages? Not really. Well, let's quickly look at what before we get to the to the scripting itself. Let me just mention, I was a bit too lazy to forge a bunch of other stuff, but I'm making as an artifact the Atlas of Creation. I don't have a huge gem surplus, so a lot of artifacts, even with my rebate, are a little out of reach. The Atlas of Creation, though, is nice. It does a complete site search of a province, and my gem income is pretty terrible. So I wouldn't mind getting that done on the thrones first, and then I'll just kind of spread it around and try to get some last-minute site searching done. Because it's the late age, I feel it's sort of less tempting to do remote site searching. Remote site searching is it's usually worth it, especially in the early age, because there are more magical sites. But it's a trade-off, because you can spend 20 nature gems, for example, remote site searching for nature, and you will find all the nature sites in 10 provinces, but that might be, statistically, there are only going to be so many nature sites. So as the frequency of magic sites gets lower, especially in the later ages, that becomes less and less worth it. Now, what you can do is you can target. So you can do like remote nature site searching only in forests, right, and things like that. And that's probably something that I should have done, and I didn't do. So my bad. Anyways, we're going to try to make up for it with this artifact at the last minute. I'm going to be helping Patala here. Patala is about to start his invasion of Atlantis. So the game is really in its last major phase here. So I'm casting Breath of, here as you can see, Breath of the Desert at Ulm in 24. This is a remote spell that increases the heat scales in a province, and so that will weaken Patala's cold protection based army. Okay, let's look at these armies. So first of all, let's look at where I'm moving them and what the general plan is. This army here is going right for his capital. 1, 2. I'm fairly confident in the capabilities of this army, and I expect it will crush everything in its path. But even if it doesn't, it will force him to react, right? He has to deal with it. Which I'm hoping means that he doesn't engage in so much raiding, and he also doesn't assemble another large army to go attack me somewhere else. Now, if he does engage in raiding, I have kept my ongoing reinforcements in the capital here. So I have a squad of a few wardens and some cavalry and more wardens here that I could deploy. And I'm thinking I'm probably going to move these south here and either raid myself, or this is likely where he would raid into my lands. Now, if we look at the information we have about him, I currently can't see his capital, although if we look, he got our scout, but only with a few, like this is a normal cap PD and just a small army of horsemen. We see a small army here with just archers and footmen. We see an army here with barbarian heavy horsemen. So this could be intended to raid. But interestingly, we see a largish army over here. Now this army, if I remember correctly, was here last time. And here I see a bunch of mages. So he seems to be deploying in this direction. And since I do not see any army massing near this throne, what I'm actually going to do is move and patrol over here. So that in case he decides to move this way, I will intercept him. This seems like a much weaker army than what I've got. Now, for him, like, okay, what are my goals in this war? To be honest, this is a bit weird because normally in Dominions, Like in this game, I'm basically playing for second place. I don't mind. I'm not trying to stop Patala from getting one of Atlantis' thrones. If this was a normal Dominions game, I would be totally on board and allied with Tianqi and fighting Patala. I'd be going for more thrones by pushing east into Patala and trying to get these 2 thrones. That's 100% what I would be doing. But it's not that kind of game, so that's not what I'm trying to do. So the only person who can stop me from winning is somebody who attacks my thrones, and the only person who can attack my thrones is Tianqi. So I'm just going to attack him before he can attack me for my thrones. Now Tianqi has 2 things he could be doing. He could try to get my thrones before Patala wins by beating Atlantis, and then he would have 2 thrones, and he would come in second place. Alternatively, even if he got just 1 of my thrones, when Patala wins, Atlantis, myself, and Tianqi will all have 1 throne, and then the tie goes to, if we have the same number of thrones, I forget if it's Dominion candles and then number of provinces, or if it's number of provinces and then Dominion candles. I should probably double check that. So that could be a way that he thinks he might win. But that's really tight. That's really close. And honestly, perhaps he's seeing my army build up and he realizes, maybe that's not very realistic. I don't know how much intel he has on me. Alternatively, he could just try to stop Patala from winning. And I'm getting, on this turn, I'm getting a feeling that maybe that's what he's trying to do, because we had actually talked about this before, but the only way for him to threaten these thrones is through my land because of this geography here, and here because there's a river that he can't cross. So he might be going this way to try to get onto this throne. We'll have to see. But anyways, I got to defend my throne, so that's what I'm doing here with this army. Now over here, given that there are no troops bordering this throne, well, there are troops here, but this is impassable because although the temperature here is heat, the temperature here is cold. But I'm expecting maybe a raid here, so we're going to move most of this army here to kind of patrol and intercept this raid. Now, we are doing a small raid of our own here, so this is just a small, well, it's pretty large, honestly, army, but I've detached a bunch of knights and defenders, and it's large enough so that if he did have some kind of small raiding party, I'd have a good chance of winning. Let's look at what I've sent over here. This is sort of the smallest of my armies. Now, obviously, some of the front line has been broken off here to raid, but at most I'm expecting, 40 to 50 barbarian heavy cavalry. So on the front line, we have I have the defenders in front and the wardens behind. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, the defenders are actually kind of tankier because of their shield. And also, I don't mind losing them as much as the wardens, which are more precious because they are sacred. The wardens can keep firing with their crossbows, and which have decay weapons on them, and I can choose to put them on hold and attack, which is what I have now. So they'll fire 2 rounds of crossbows, and then they'll trickle in through the front lines. But I prefer for now to have the actual defenders on the front line, just to meet whatever enemy charge is coming at me. I've got 2 small squads of knights on hold and attack rear on the flanks. And then I've got a few blobs of wardens and of defenders in the back here, and they're on hold and attack closest. And their job is, in case he has weird flyer like heroes or something, I need some kind of troop to catch flyers, but also air elementals. And that's why I have some wardens here, because the wardens have magic weapons. So they'll be able to handle any air elementals that get summoned and that appear in the back. And as a general rule, as you'll see in all the formations that I'm doing, I mean, this one is pretty compact at the front, but you'll notice that my backfield here is pretty sparse. I've spread out all my units, and because he can also do Thunderstrike, and spells like that. And so unless you really need to be bunched up together to benefit from blesses, then you might as well spread out, so that AoE evocations don't hit you as hard. So we've got a communion set up. I've got a few different scripts for different communion masters, and I'll show some of them here, and you'll see them in my other battles too. So this script here is my earth buffing script. So communion master, summon earth power, legions of steel, weapons of sharpness, strength of giants. So those are the 3 main earth buffs, and then I've got a few of these guys peppered throughout the formation. I've got 2 in the back. I've got these guys in front are doing it. And they're just there to buff our troops. Now we have one guy doing the flaming arrows buff. Now this generator gives 2 fire gems. So after he's done doing flaming arrows, he'll also do fire fen, buff everybody's fire resistance. We have one of these in each of our armies. We also have our Fog Warriors caster. Now, this Cloak of Astral Storms gives 4 air gems. And so what I do is I put it on an air 3 guy, and I have him cast Arrow Fend right at the beginning. So that, because Tenchi has a lot of archers of their own, I don't want any stray arrows killing any of my mages. So turn 1 Arrow Fend. Then he has some reinvig items. Because he's old and, temperature scales, that might put him over 100 fatigue. So we want him to reinvig. He'll get into the communion. And once he's in the communion, he can cast things easily. And then he'll still have 3 temporary gems he can put up. Frog Warriors. And then the rest is just self-buffs for him and for the communion, earth power, and temper flesh. And then he can do whatever he wants to do. As a general rule, the people that I have with precious gear, I don't have them on advance and cast spells, whereas all the others I do have on advance and cast spells. Okay, I only have 2 Ivy Kings, and there isn't one with this army, so the nature duties are taken up by Lene the Adventurer. So she's got 2 boosters, she's got a cornucopia for 2 temporary nature gems, and she's got a little bit of reinvig. So she's just doing mass regeneration, which will be free with the cornucopia, and then she's got some nature gems so she can do relief, which is sort of the second most important spell. Now we don't have, I haven't scripted mass protection, and I haven't scripted Serpent's Blessing for poison resistance, but this army doesn't have all the tools at its disposal. Now what I could do is I could put her artificially in the communion with a matrix, but then what you want to do is give her like a ranged weapon, so that after she's done her nature spells, she doesn't keep spamming nature spells, because that'll burn out the communion pretty fast. And that is all really there is in this communion. Oh, there's an astral guy too. Now, because I only have 1 astral gem generator, I couldn't. The clam of pearls is water and air, and I've only got my pretender who can do water spells, and his turns are too precious. So I've only got these Staff of the One God, which gives 3 temporary astral gems. And there are a few things I want to do. I would love to do Will of the Fates. That takes 4 astral gems, but I also just want anti-magic. So what I've decided to do for this army is we're not going to have Will of the Fates. We're just going to do anti-magic, Power of the Spheres, and we'll do like a mini version of Will of the Fates, which is Battle of Fortune. Okay, the Wardens. You'll notice that a lot of them are on Blessing and Fire, because this army does not have like a prophet or any holy person in a communion. We just have a bunch of Holy One troops. We have enough of them to bless all of our sacred, so it's not really an issue. But I just thought I should point that out. And I've also split up all my bows of war. I have about 15 to 20 in total, and I've given 5 or 6 to each army. So there are 5 guys here with bows of war. And that's it for this army. Now let's take a look at this army down here. This is the army that took the throne recently. but it's just been sort of rescripted and rebalanced with, the appropriate resources that I had available from after setting up the other armies. So if we look at the positioning, we still have something very similar. We've got a few units in the back to try to catch, air elementals or whatever happens to be there. I've got some archers and some crossbows in this army, so they're placed sort of close to the front. We've got a line of defenders here and a line of defenders here, and then we've got some chaff, so just some melee sponges out in front, some shamblers and some corpse constructs. The few wardens that I have in this army are scattered here in these little squads, and they're on hold and attack closest or hold and attack flyers. So their job, because of their magic weapons, is to intercept any air elementals that might make it to the back ranks. Okay, the communion is basically set up the same way. Now this army has the prophet, dude with a tood. He's gotten a limp, but he's still pretty healthy despite his old age. So he's doing Divine Blessing, then jumping in the Communion, then doing Fanaticism for morale, and Divine Channeling and Earth Power. So good for him. And then the only different thing here is in this army, I have a separate guy doing just Fog Warriors. And in fact, this is slightly a mistake. He should be casting another air spell here. I don't know if I fix this, so we'll have to come back and take a look at this. Here we've got an Ivy King who's got Nature 5 and a Nature Gem. I don't need a lot of extra gems here because we're moving into a province with a lab, so I'll be able to restock later. But he's just doing Mass Regen. Oh wait, he should have an extra gem because right now he can only do Mass Regen Relief and he can't even cast Serpent's Blessing, so that was a mistake. Anyways, this guy here is just doing Mass Flight, and then he's joining a Communion to just do Evocation spells. Here we have Flaming Arrows, Firefend. I actually have this on Zorfion, Adept of the Golden Order. He's got a bit of a fire booster because why not? In fact, I even have him do Phoenix Power, Flaming Arrows outside of the Communion and then join the Communion because because most of my Communion slaves do not have a fire cross path, so this would take a bunch of fatigue on the Communion. So since with the booster he can do it outside the Communion, it'll just save some fatigue on the Communion slaves. Earth Buffer here. Another Earth Buffer, more slaves, Communion slaves. An Earth Buffer here. Here is our guy who's doing Will of the Fates. Here is a separate air guy whose job is just to do Arrow Fend and Wind Guide. So same thing, we're doing Arrow Fend, Communion Master, and Wind Guide. And this here is, for now, this is not an Earth Buffer, it's just sort of an Evocation Mage. So he's just doing Communion Master, Summon Earth Power, and whatever he wants. Now, in practice, this is going to be Thunder Strikes, but could be Gifts from Heaven, it could be Blade Wind. I didn't care to script exactly what I wanted at this point. Here you see a couple of my melee wardens. This one I threw a bunch of random other stuff on him, but he's got 2 Firebrands. This guy has a Gate Cleaver. Obviously, this is great for sieging, but importantly, it's armor negating. So this is great at killing any kind of crazy thugs he might have. It's also still very useful against air elementals because it's a magic weapon. So these guys, you can see they're on hold and attack flyers. There's another one here. Okay, we've got a guy for anti-magic. He's just got an astral gem. Good enough. Earth Buffer. Here we have one of our bean shees. She still has, for some reason, her lightning rod. This is actually a slight mistake because I'm going to replace this with a crossbow later. But she has the ghost orb. Oh, in fact, she doesn't even have her Communion stuff. Okay, so she's not she's not set up at all. So I think I fixed this later. But pretend for a moment that she was in a Communion, that she had a crystal here. This is what she would look like. She would have this and like this, right? So now she's in a communion from the beginning, but the first turn there aren't any communion slaves, so she can't cast anything. So she just does aim or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Then the key spell, which is Wailing Winds. Then she'll do invulnerability. That'll give it to everybody in the communion. A few buffs, and then fire, so that she doesn't wreck the communion with death spells like summoning skeletons. And that's it for this army. And finally, let's look at the main army here. One of the things that we have is we have a Budget Prophet here joining the army from the south. So he's just a priest who has magic paths, so he can join in with a crystal matrix. And same thing here, we've got a crossbow, so that after he's done his buffs, he can just not wreck the communion. So he's doing elemental fortitude, then the communion will come online, so we can do divine blessing, fanaticism, divine channeling. So just getting our holy spells done. And then here we have our large army. So let me just quickly do the mages. Well, same thing here. We've got our guys with bows of war. We've got a couple of guys with gate cleavers. Earth buffers. Here is our Ivy King doing all the nature spells. Will of the Fates. You can see here I have many more Earth buffers because we have a much larger army. This guy for some reason is still researching. I don't know why he's not coming with us. We're bringing with us a bunch of regular Magisters, if only for their siege strength. So I'm not casting Storm myself because so we'll talk about that in a minute. But if Storm does go up because Tianqi might cast Storm, then these guys will take advantage of it and will be able to cast lightning bolts. If it doesn't go up, then they honestly, with Air 1, I don't really care what they do. They'll cast like Phantasmal Warriors or something. It really doesn't matter. More melee wardens for killing air elementals. By the way, this isn't like the ideal air elemental killing kit. It's just I had earth gems and fire gems, and it was cheap to make these. Yeah, so it's not like, this isn't like a super sophisticated strategy. I think it'll work. Anyways, here's our fire guy, flaming arrows and fire fend. Anything else? Mass flight. Here's our fog warriors. Yeah, so this guy set it properly. Fog warriors and then thunder fend. Here we have mirror image, wailing winds, invulnerability, liquid body, and then fire. Here we have another. So this guy's set up to buff our cold resistance in case we would need it. So he's doing it with Warriors of Muspelheim, because we do not have really a good water mage to do it using the enchantment spell. Arrow Fend and then Wind Guide. You've seen this before. Here's our anti-magic guy. And we have our Lich that we've brought with us with the Ancient Casket. And the Lich is doing Life After Death. Okay, let's look at the positioning here and the scripting. So we've got, like, this is a huge army, okay? So there's tons of guys. We've got squads in the back corners, a line in the back, and this was just chaff we got in an event. And then this is more chaff that we have here. All this stuff is to catch flyers or air elementals. We have lines here. Hang on, let me find the units that this corresponds to. Yeah, we've got lines here on hold and attack closest. Well, all of these actually, many of these squads are on hold and attack closest, the guys in the back, because their job is to catch intercepting, flyers. Now, this line here, if during the battle, all my forces in the front converge and there's a big attack rear flank that comes, these guys on attack closest on this side will be in a position to come and intercept. Now, we also have our own attack rear squads with our cavalry, which is probably set to hold an attack rear somewhere. I'm not sure where it is, but surprises me that I have them. Maybe they're moving in this turn. Or maybe I'm just blind. Here they are. I'm sure we just saw them many times. So they're on hold and attack rear. The Wardens are again mainly being used to catch flyers, which would be air elementals or any special thugs. And then we've got lines of dudes in the front. 1, 2, 3 lines. And then a fourth line a bit further behind. And these guys are on a sparse line formation, which will hopefully give like a checkerboard pattern, which will, reduce the impact of any area of effect attacks like thunder strikes on them. So that is the basic formation and the basic script. And I think that's going to be it for now. Okay, this is turn... All right, this is turn 54. Next turn we move in. We have our first battles. And I'll tell you right now. So I'm on the 2 turns ahead of this. So I've moved here. Then I've moved on to the capital. There have not yet been any significant battles. But I'm expecting battles in this next turn. And I don't have the results yet. Now, next turn, not much happens actually. I do detect some small issues with this formation, which I do fix. And I make some final tweaks, but I think I'm going to end the episode here. And the next episode I'll pick up when we have our first when I have the first interesting results to report about this war against Tianqi. Anyways, I'll see you guys then. Take care.